Welcome to African Mafia Stories, where loyalty is currency, power has a price, and every city hides a secret. Today's story is based in Kenya. Enjoy.
By the time Zawadi Juma arrived at the restaurant, she was already in a bad mood. This was not unusual. Most people who met her for the first time assumed she was naturally intimidating. Tall, sharp-eyed, economical with words. The kind of woman who could silence a room simply by entering it. The truth was less dramatic. Zawadi simply spent most of her life dealing with people who ignored good advice and then acted surprised when disaster arrived. After 15 years in military intelligence and another 8 running one of Nairobi's most respected security firms, she had developed a healthy distrust of human decision-making. Particularly rich humans. Rich humans often believed money made them bulletproof. Experience suggested otherwise. The maitre d' escorted her through the restaurant's crowded dining area. The place overlooked Nairobi's skyline from the upper floors of a luxury hotel in Westlands. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a city glittering beneath the evening sky. Office towers glowed gold. Headlights flowed through the streets like rivers of light. Somewhere beyond the horizon, thunderstorms gathered over the Rift Valley. At a corner table sat Kamau Njoroge. The reason she was here. The reason she had cancelled an enjoyable evening involving absolutely nobody asking for protection. He stood as she approached. "You are late." Zawadi stopped. Most clients opened with a greeting. Some opened with gratitude. A few opened with panic. Nobody opened with criticism. "Interesting. I was on time until you spoke." Kamau blinked. Then laughed. A genuine laugh. That irritated her more than if he had been offended. He was younger than she expected. Late 30s perhaps. Well-dressed without being flashy. Intelligent eyes. Confident posture. Too confident. People like that usually required rescue. "Please sit," he said. She remained standing. "I understand you've requested a security assessment." "Yes." "Why?" The billionaire leaned back. "Straight to business. You're paying for my expertise, not my personality." "That's unfortunate. I was hoping for both." Zawadi stared at him. Kamau smiled. She did not. Eventually he surrendered. "Fine." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs. Letters. Screenshots. Threats. Dozens of them. Most anonymous. Several specific. A few disturbingly detailed. Zawadi examined them quietly. "How long?" 3 weeks. "And you waited until now to hire protection?" Kamau shrugged. "I thought it would pass. There are easier ways to tell me you're an idiot." The smile returned. Again. Apparently the man enjoyed being insulted. That was a new one. "I was hoping you'd say that." "Why?" "Because everyone else keeps pretending I'm not." Before she could respond, a waiter arrived. Kamau ordered coffee. Zawadi ordered coffee. The waiter departed. Silence settled briefly between them. Then Kamau glanced toward the city. "Do you ever wonder how many secrets are hiding out there?" Zawadi followed his gaze. "No." "Really?" "No." "You don't seem curious." "I'm very curious." He looked confused. "Then why don't you wonder?" "Because secrets eventually become paperwork." For the first time, Kamau looked genuinely impressed. "That might be the most depressing thing I've ever had. It also happens to be true." The waiter returned with their coffee. Kamau took a sip. Then became serious. The change was immediate. Enough that Zawadi noticed. People revealed themselves in moments like that. When the performance slipped. When the joke ended. When the real conversation arrived. "I found something." There it was. The real reason. Not the threats. Not the security assessment. Something else. "What?" Kamau looked around the restaurant. Checking. Confirming. Measuring risk. Then lowered his voice. There are irregularities in my network. What kind of irregularities? I'm not sure. That answer bothered him. She could see it. Successful people disliked uncertainty, especially people who built billion-dollar companies. What sort of network? She asked. You know what my company does? She did. Everyone in East Africa knew. Kamau's payment platform processed millions of transactions every day across multiple countries. Businesses. Governments. Banks. Consumers. Money moved through his systems constantly. Someone is manipulating transaction pathways. Zawadi frowned. Stealing. Maybe. The hesitation caught her attention. You don't sound convinced. I'm not. Why? Kamau rubbed his chin. Searching for words. Because it doesn't look like theft. What does it look like? He stared into his coffee. Then delivered a sentence she would remember long after the shooting started. It looks like someone is building something. Before she could ask another question, a sharp crack echoed outside. The restaurant windows vibrated. Several patrons looked up, confused. A second crack followed. Louder. Closer. Zawadi's instincts activated instantly. Not because of the sound itself. Because of the reactions. 3 men near the entrance stood simultaneously. Too fast. Too coordinated. One reached beneath his jacket. Zawadi was already moving. She grabbed Kamau by the shoulder and shoved him sideways. The first bullet shattered the window where his head had been. Glass exploded across the restaurant. Screams erupted. Tables overturned. People dropped to the floor. The gunman fired again. Zawadi tackled Kamau behind a concrete support pillar. The second round struck marble. Fragments sprayed through the air. Chaos swallowed the room. Was that for me? Kamau asked. His voice sounded remarkably calm. Zawadi stared at him. Who else do you think they're shooting at? Fair point. Another gunshot. Another shattered window. Security personnel from the hotel began responding. Guests stampeded toward exits. The attackers adjusted position. Trying to get a clear shot. Trying to finish the job quickly. Professionals. Not amateurs. Zawadi pulled a compact radio from her jacket. Team Alpha, immediate response. The reply arrived instantly. Already moving. Good. She risked a quick look around the pillar. 3 shooters. 1 spotter. Vehicle outside. Planned. Fast. Expensive. The kind of operation people launched when failure carried consequences. Interesting. Very interesting. Because nobody spent this much money to kill an ordinary businessman. The attackers advanced. One of them raised a rifle, then suddenly disappeared backward. A security operative had reached him fast. The remaining shooters immediately retreated. Professional again. No panic. No hesitation. The mission had failed. Time to leave. Within seconds they were gone. Vehicles roaring away into Nairobi traffic. Silence slowly returned. Broken only by alarms. Shouting. And shattered glass falling onto the restaurant floor. Kamau exhaled. Well. Zawadi stood. What? I think the security assessment is going poorly. For the first time that evening, despite herself, she laughed. Just once. A short, unexpected laugh. Kamau noticed. His smile widened. That sounded expensive. The laughter vanished instantly. Don't get used to it. But something had changed. Only slightly. A tiny shift. The first crack in a wall she had spent years building. Outside, sirens were already approaching. Inside, terrified diners were trying to understand what had happened. And somewhere in Nairobi, a very powerful person had just learned something troubling. Kamau Njoroge was still alive. And now Zawadi Juma was involved. For people who preferred their secrets buried, that was very bad news indeed. By sunrise, the shooting had become Nairobi's favorite breakfast conversation. Every radio station had a theory. Every blogger had a source. Every person with a phone and confidence had suddenly become a security analyst. One headline called it an attempted robbery. Another claimed Kamau Njoroge had political enemies. A third suggested the attack had been staged for sympathy before an upcoming business deal. Amina read that one aloud in Zawadi's office and nearly spat coffee onto her keyboard. Staged, she said. People really wake up and choose stupidity before tea. Zawadi stood at the window, watching morning traffic thicken below. Her office occupied the 5th floor of a discreet building in Upper Hill. No flashy signage. No glass reception designed to impress visitors. Just secure elevators, quiet corridors, then staff who knew not to ask unnecessary questions. Kamau sat across the boardroom table with a bandage on his cheek where flying glass had cut him. He looked irritated rather than frightened, which Zawadi found either admirable or deeply foolish. Possibly both. You should be in a hospital, she said. I'm fine. You were nearly shot in the head. But I wasn't. That is not a medical argument. It is the only one I have. Amina leaned back in her chair. Rich people survive one assassination attempt and immediately become philosophers. Kamau pointed at her. I like her. She gets worse, Zawadi said. Good. I enjoy consistency. Zawadi placed a folder on the table. Her team had worked through the night. Vehicle footage. Hotel cameras. Traffic feeds. Witness statements. Ballistics. Police chatter. The results were disturbing. The shooters used stolen vehicles, clean weapons, temporary phones, then false plates. Their exit route avoided most city cameras. Whoever sent them had resources. Kamau's expression sobered. Can you trace them? Not yet. That means no. That means not yet. Amina tapped her laptop and sent the restaurant footage to the wall screen. The attack replayed without sound. 3 men entering. One watching the room. One moving toward the windows. One positioning near the service corridor. Fast. Coordinated. Cold. Kamau watched silently. For the first time since Zawadi met him, no joke came. Good. Some lessons deserved silence. Zawadi paused the footage on the spotter's face. Do you know him? Kamau leaned forward. No. You're sure? I meet hundreds of people. That is not an answer. He looked again. Then shook his head. No. I don't know him. Amina zoomed in. Face match pending. But whoever this man is, he is not local street muscle. The shoes alone are too expensive for small foolishness. Kamau looked at her. You identify criminals by footwear. I identify everyone by footwear. Shoes are honest. Mouths are decorative. Despite himself, Kamau smiled. Zawadi did not. Now show me what you found. Kamau opened his laptop. The playfulness disappeared from him completely. Numbers filled the screen. Thousands of transactions. Vendor codes. Government departments. County disbursements. Payment switches. Settlement accounts. To most people, it would have looked like financial rain. To Kamau, it was weather with intention. He connected his screen to the boardroom display. My company processes payments through licensed partners. Banks, mobile wallets, government systems, merchant networks. We do not touch every shilling directly, but our rails authenticate and route a large portion of the movement. Speak human, Amina said. Kamau sighed. Money enters a road. My company helps direct traffic. Better. 3 weeks ago, I noticed strange congestion on certain roads. Small transactions, split across multiple partners, moving through government-linked payment instructions. The amounts were too minor to trigger alarms individually, but together. He tapped a key. The scattered points merged into a pattern. Zawadi stepped closer. Not obvious. Not simple. But deliberate. Thousands of tiny payments bending toward the same hidden channels. Together, Kamau continued, they form a shadow route. Amina's humor faded. How much money? I don't know yet. Guess. He hesitated. Zawadi noticed. Kamau was not a man who hesitated easily. Kamau. At least 4 billion shillings over 18 months. The room went still. Even Amina did not speak. 4 billion shillings did not move by accident. It required signatures, systems, protection, and silence. Stolen? Zawadi asked. That's what I thought. And now? Kamau brought up another graph. Now I'm not sure. The money isn't moving like stolen money. It isn't being cashed out quickly. It isn't being washed through luxury purchases or obvious offshore accounts. Then where is it going? He zoomed in. All of it gathers here. A holding structure appeared on the screen. Not one company. A nest of them. Names layered beneath names. Foundations. Contractors. Consultancies. Infrastructure vehicles. Amina whistled softly. That is a very expensive spiderweb. Kamau nodded. I traced one company to a dead director. Another to a lawyer who resigned from the bar 5 years ago. Another to a medical supply firm with no warehouse, no staff, and apparently a CEO who also sells goat feed in Nakuru. Amina looked offended. Leave goat feed out of crime. It has suffered enough. Zawadi folded her arms. Who did you tell? My board chair. Who else? My compliance director. My lawyer. One senior official at Treasury. Zawadi's face hardened. Amina was already typing. Names. Kamau gave them. One by one. The room grew colder with each such result. The compliance director had died at dawn. Road accident on Mombasa Road. The lawyer had not appeared in chambers that morning. Phone off. House empty. The Treasury official had resigned overnight for personal reasons and boarded a flight to Dubai. Kamau stared at the screen. His voice dropped. No. Zawadi watched him absorb it. This was the moment arrogance left. Not permanently perhaps. But enough. The world had shown its teeth. They are cleaning up, he said. Yes. Because of me. Because of what you found. He stood and walked to the window. Below, Nairobi carried on. Buses coughing smoke. Office workers crossing roads with brave indifference. Vendors arranging fruit under umbrellas. A city alive with ordinary hunger. Kamau looked suddenly smaller against it. Not weak. Just human. I thought it was corruption. Zawadi joined him at the window. It is. No, his voice was quiet. This is bigger. Before she could respond, her phone rang. Unknown number. Amina looked up sharply. Zawadi answered but said nothing. For 3 seconds there was only soft breathing. Then an old man's voice entered the room, warm and polished. Miss Juma. I was told you are difficult to frighten. Zawadi's eyes narrowed. Mzee Kilonzo. Kamau turned. Amina stopped typing. The name changed the air. Mzee Kilonzo was not officially powerful. That was the dangerous part. He held no elected office. Owned no company people could easily point to. Appeared at charity events, funerals, golf tournaments, and closed-door meetings where decisions quietly changed shape. Publicly, he was a respected elder. Privately, he was the man powerful people visited when they wanted something ugly made tidy. Kilonzo chuckled. Please. Mzee makes me sound old. You are old. And yet I remain busy. What do you want? To save lives. That would be new for you. Amina's eyebrows rose. Kamau stared. Kilonzo laughed again, but this time the warmth thinned. Tell your client to stop looking at patterns he does not understand. He is a clever man, but clever men often mistake doors for invitations. Zawadi's voice stayed flat. And if he doesn't stop? A pause. Then the old man's voice became soft enough to be intimate. Then Nairobi will bury him in daylight and call it breaking news. The line went dead. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Amina whispered, well. At least the villain has manners. Kamau turned back to the screen. The pattern glowed against the wall. Silent. Patient. Waiting. Zawadi looked at it and understood one thing clearly. This was no longer a security assignment. It was a war invitation wrapped in numbers. And someone had just RSVP'd with bullets. The first thing Zawadi did after the phone call was cancel Kamau's afternoon meetings. The second thing she did was cancel his evening meetings. The third thing she did was cancel the next week of his life. Kamau objected to all three. I have a board meeting. No. I have investors flying in from London. No. I have an interview tomorrow. No. You seem very committed to this word. Zawadi looked up from her tablet. You were threatened by one of the most influential men in the country. He didn't technically threaten me. Amina nearly fell out of her chair. He said Nairobi would bury you. Yes. And you consider that encouragement? It lacked specifics. That is because rich people are raised differently, Amina said. Zawadi ignored both of them. You're disappearing. Kamau blinked. I'm what? Disappearing. No. Yes. No. Yes. The argument continued for another 6 minutes. The result remained exactly the same. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Kamau Njoroge officially ceased to exist. At least temporarily. The operation was elegant. Zawadi preferred elegant solutions. They required less cleanup. A maintenance truck left Kamau's company headquarters shortly after sunset. Inside sat 3 men wearing utility uniforms. One was actually a maintenance worker. One was a security operative. One was a billionaire experiencing profound disappointment. Kamau looked down at the overalls he had been forced to wear. I hate this. Good. Why? It means you're paying attention. The truck merged into evening traffic. Nobody looked twice. Nobody cared. The city was busy surviving itself. A few kilometers away, television crews were already gathering outside Kamau's headquarters. Rumors had started. Questions had started. The machine was beginning to turn. And soon the entire country would believe he had vanished. The safe house sat on the edge of a coffee farm outside Limuru. No marble floors. No private cinema. No luxury vehicles. Just old stone buildings, green hills, and enough distance from Nairobi to make surveillance difficult. The owner was a 70-year-old widow named Margaret. She greeted them at the door with the enthusiasm of a customs officer. You look tired. Thank you, Kamau said. That wasn't a compliment. The old woman took one look at him. You are the billionaire. Apparently. You are shorter than television. Kamau stared. Margaret walked away. Amina smiled. I already like her. The widow disappeared into the kitchen. A minute later they heard her shouting at somebody about bread. The atmosphere felt strangely normal. Which made the danger feel even stranger. By 9 o'clock that evening, the news broke. Tech billionaire missing. Every channel carried it. Every website carried it. Every radio station discussed it. The story exploded. One commentator suggested a kidnapping. Another suggested political retaliation. A third claimed he had fled the country. That theory became particularly popular. Kamau watched his own disappearance from a couch in the farmhouse living room. This is surreal. It gets worse, Amina said. It gets worse. She handed him a tablet. Social media had entered the conversation. Thousands of people were analyzing photographs, tracking flight records, reviewing old interviews, inventing theories. One post suggested Kamau had secretly joined a monastery. Another claimed he was hiding on a private island. A third insisted he had been abducted by foreign intelligence services. People are insane. People are bored. That seems unfair. It's usually the same thing. Kamau reluctantly admitted she had a point. Later that night, after the others had gone to bed, Zawadi sat alone on the farmhouse veranda. The air smelled of rain and wet soil. Coffee fields stretched into darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The peacefulness felt borrowed. Temporary. Like a ceasefire. The screen of her phone glowed softly. She reviewed reports from her team. The attack investigation. Financial records. Communications intercepts. Every road eventually seemed to lead back toward the same place. Kilonzo. Not directly. Never directly. Men like Kilonzo survived by existing one step beyond evidence. They built walls made from other people. If blame arrived, it found someone else first. A shadow moved behind her. She didn't turn. You're supposed to be asleep. Kamau sat beside her. So are you. Unfortunately, I'm working. Unfortunately, I'm being hunted. Good point. They sat quietly for a moment. The silence felt comfortable. Unexpectedly comfortable. Kamau leaned back. When I was 23, I thought success would solve problems. Zawadi smiled faintly. And? It turns out success just upgrades them. The answer surprised a laugh out of her. A real one. Not the brief accidental sound from the restaurant. Kamau looked pleased. You laugh. Really? It sounds expensive. There it is again. The joke remains good. It wasn't good the first time. It was. The smile lingered. For a few seconds neither looked away. Then Kamau cleared his throat. The moment passed. Not awkwardly. Just carefully. Like something both people noticed but neither intended to discuss. The next morning brought bad news. Bad news had become extremely punctual. Amina entered the dining room carrying a tablet. Her expression immediately ruined breakfast. Tell me that's not your face. It is. Then I assume something exploded. Worse. Kamau looked up from his coffee. What happened? Amina placed the tablet on the table. A news report filled the screen. The compliance director. The man Kamau had told about the financial anomalies. Dead. Officially a traffic accident. Unofficially. The photographs suggested otherwise. The vehicle damage didn't match the police explanation. Neither did witness accounts. Neither did common sense. Kamau stared at the screen. The room fell silent. This is because of me. No, Zawadi said immediately. He looked up. It isn't. He died because he knew. He died because someone killed him. The distinction mattered. Zawadi needed him to understand that. Because guilt made people reckless. And reckless people made mistakes. They could not afford mistakes. Not anymore. Amina's phone rang. She answered. Listened. Then slowly lowered the device. Nobody liked her expression. What now? She looked at Zawadi. Then Kamau. Then back at the screen. The lawyer. The missing lawyer. The last person who knew. What about him? Kamau asked. Amina swallowed. For perhaps the first time since they met, she sounded genuinely unsettled. We found his car. Silence. And It was abandoned outside Naivasha. Kamau leaned forward. Was he inside? No. Relief briefly appeared. Then vanished. Because Amina wasn't finished. There was a message. The room grew still. What message? Amina looked directly at Kamau. Then read the note aloud. 4 words. Only 4. But enough to change everything. Don't trust the board. The silence that followed felt heavier than any gunfire. Because bullets were simple. Betrayal never was. And somewhere inside Nairobi, powerful men were beginning to realize something troubling. Kamau Njoroge was still alive. And Zawadi Juma was getting closer. The message sat on the dining table for most of the morning. Not the original note. That was already being examined by people who charged alarming amounts of money to tell other people whether handwriting was genuine. The words themselves remained. Don't trust the board. 4 words. 4 unpleasant words. 4 words capable of ruining a man's week. Kamau stared at them as the repetition might somehow improve them. It did not. Eventually Amina closed her laptop. You've looked at those words for 40 minutes. I'm thinking. No. You're marinating. Kamau sighed. I trusted them. That is generally how betrayal works. The billionaire considered throwing a bread roll at her. He decided against it. Mostly because she looked capable of throwing it back harder. Zawadi entered the room carrying a folder. The expression on her face immediately silenced everyone. Good news rarely arrived wearing that expression. What happened? Kamau asked. We found David Mwangi. The board member. The man who had quietly appeared within the financial network. Kamau sat forward. Where? Not where. When? She placed several photographs on the table. Security images. Parking garages. Restaurants. Private clubs. Airport lounges. Different locations. Different dates. The same faces. Over and over. David Mwangi meeting the same group of men repeatedly. Men who should not have been meeting him. Men connected to shell companies. Government contracts. Procurement systems. Financial intermediaries. Amina studied the images. That is a lot of coincidence. There is no such thing as that much coincidence. Kamau continued sorting through the photographs. Then froze. His hand stopped moving. His eyes narrowed. The room became very quiet. Because his expression had changed. Not surprise. Recognition. Slow, painful recognition. Zawadi noticed immediately. Who? Kamau slid one photograph across the table. His voice sounded strangely flat. There. Amina leaned closer. Then cast softly. The image showed David Mwangi standing beside another man. A familiar man. A respected man. A man who had appeared on magazine covers, charity boards, and business conferences. A man Kamau trusted. His board chairman. The first person Kamau informed when he discovered the financial anomalies. The first person who told him to remain calm. The first person who advised him not to involve outside investigators. The first person who urged patience. The realization hit like a hammer. Amina sat back. That is unfortunate. Nobody disagreed. Kamau continued staring at the photograph. A strange sadness settled over his face. Not anger. Not yet. Sadness. Which was somehow worse. Because anger belonged to enemies. Sadness belonged to friends. You know what the funny thing is, he said quietly. Nobody answered. He paid for my university fees. The room fell silent. Kamau laughed once. A short empty sound. When my father died, he helped my family. He looked down at the photograph. He taught me how to negotiate. Nobody spoke. Because betrayal always hurt more when gratitude was involved. Zawadi watched him carefully. Most people imagined betrayal created rage immediately. It rarely did. First came disbelief. Then grief. Then rage. The rage arrived later. When the grief got tired. By afternoon they had returned to Nairobi. Not openly. Not publicly. The city still believed Kamau was missing. Zawadi intended to keep it that way. For now. Their destination was an aging office building near Upper Hill. Nothing impressive. Nothing memorable. The kind of place successful people ignored. Which made it useful. A private investigator named Joseph occupied the third floor. Joseph was 63 years old. Thin. Sharp. And permanently annoyed by existence. He opened the door before they knocked. You brought trouble. Hello, Joseph. I preferred when you worked elsewhere. You say that every time. Because every time it's true. His eyes shifted to Kamau. Recognition appeared immediately. Then disappointment. Then resignation. Wonderful. Kamau frowned. Why does everyone react like that? Joseph stepped aside. Experience. Inside, the office looked as though technology had offended him personally. Paper files filled shelves. Maps covered walls. A kettle occupied a position of authority near the window. Joseph pointed toward chairs. Nobody sat. That seemed to suit him. I assume this is about David Mwangi. The room became still. Zawadi folded her arms. You know him. Joseph looked offended. I know everybody. That wasn't the question. The old investigator sighed. Then opened a filing cabinet. Several folders emerged. Photographs. Vehicle records. Property transactions. Meeting schedules. The pile continued growing. Amina stared. You've been busy. I dislike television. Kamau studied the documents. The deeper he looked, the worse it became. David's activities stretched back years. Not months. Years. Private meetings. Offshore travel. Hidden company ownership. Consulting arrangements with no obvious purpose. And every road eventually pointed toward the same destination. Mzee Kilonzo. Not directly. Never directly. But close enough. Joseph placed one final photograph on the desk. The image showed a private dinner at an exclusive estate. David Mwangi. The board chairman. Several business leaders. And Kilonzo. Laughing together. Comfortable together. Familiar. Kamau felt something break. Not dramatically. Quietly. The last fragile piece of denial. They knew. Joseph nodded. Looks that way. They all knew. Looks that way too. The billionaire stared at the image. Then suddenly asked. Why me? Nobody answered immediately. Because it was a good question. A fair question. Perhaps the most important question. Why allow Kamau to discover the pattern at all? Why not stop him sooner? Why not eliminate him immediately? Why wait? Zawadi walked toward the window. Something about the timeline bothered her. Something didn't fit. Then her phone rang. One of her surveillance teams. She answered. Talk. The voice on the other end sounded tense. That got her attention immediately. Boss. We have movement. What kind? Kilonzo. Everyone looked up. What about him? Private meeting tonight. Location. A pause. Then. The Windsor Estate. Amina whistled softly. The Windsor Estate. One of Nairobi's most exclusive private properties. A place where fortunes were made, destroyed, and occasionally hidden. Politicians visited. Investors visited. People with power visited. People seeking power visited. Ordinary people did not. What time? Zawadi asked. 8 o'clock. The call ended. Silence settled over the office. Joseph immediately shook his head. No. Nobody had even spoken. Yet somehow he already knew. Know what? Amina asked. Know whatever you're about to do. Zawadi looked at him. We are just discussing options. Joseph pointed. There. That face. What face? The face that appears right before gunfire. Amina nodded. To be fair, it is a very recognizable face. Kamau suddenly felt nervous. Because both women were looking at each other. And smiling. Not happy smiles. Operation smiles. The kind of smiles that produced police reports later. No. Nobody listened. We are not attending a secret meeting full of powerful criminals. Still nobody listened. That's a terrible idea. Amina stood. Most interesting ideas are. Kamau looked toward Joseph. Help me. Joseph picked up his kettle. Pity. Outside, Nairobi continued humming beneath the afternoon sun. Millions of people carrying on with ordinary lives. Completely unaware that a meeting was being arranged. A meeting that might expose the conspiracy. Or get everyone involved killed. Possibly both. And somewhere across the city, Mzee Kilonzo was preparing for the evening. Confident. Patient. Certain the game remained under his control. He was about to discover that Zawadi Juma had stopped playing defense. By 7:30 that evening, Nairobi's most powerful people were preparing to celebrate charity. At least that was the official explanation. The invitation described the event as a private fundraising gala supporting educational initiatives across East Africa. The invitation did not mention the cabinet ministers. It did not mention the billionaires. It certainly did not mention the men whose names appeared in investigations that somehow never became court cases. The Windsor estate sat on several acres of land overlooking the northern edge of the city. Old money lived there. The kind of wealth that did not need to impress anyone because it had already purchased half the audience. From a distance, the estate looked beautiful. Closer inspection revealed something else. Security cameras. Controlled access points. Private guards. Layers. People with secrets loved layers. Inside a black sedan parked half a kilometer away, Kamau adjusted his bow tie and stared at his reflection. I hate this. Amina checked her earpiece. That makes 4 consecutive chapters. I'm being consistent. That's not the word I'd use. Zawadi sat beside them reviewing a digital floor plan. The invitation had been acquired through channels that were better left unexplained. One did not ask certain questions when working with Amina. The answers were usually alarming. Remember the plan, Zawadi said. Kamau looked offended. The fact that you keep saying that suggests the plan is bad. The plan is simple. That's not reassuring. It becomes less reassuring if you keep talking. That ended the discussion. For approximately 12 seconds. Then Kamau sighed. Are we certain this is necessary? No. Wonderful. But it is useful. Marginally better. Amina smiled. I'm enjoying how quickly you're adapting to disappointment. The ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Soft music drifted through the room. Champagne flowed. Conversations unfolded in carefully measured tones. The guests looked elegant. Successful. Harmless. Zawadi knew better. Some predators were uniforms. Others were tailored suits. The second category was usually more expensive. She moved through the crowd naturally. Not hiding. Not attracting attention. Just another guest. Kamau stayed close. Which was fortunate. Because if left unattended he would probably attempt something helpful. Helpful people caused problems. Across the room, ministers spoke with investors. Business executives discussed infrastructure. Foreign consultants exchanged business cards. Everyone smiled. Nobody relaxed. Power recognized power. And this room contained enough power to influence entire countries. Amina's voice crackled softly through the earpiece. Left side. Zawadi glanced casually. David Mwangi, the board member, standing near the bar. Relaxed. Comfortable. Completely unaware that several people now understood exactly what he had been doing. Interesting. Very interesting. Because guilty people usually looked nervous. David looked secure. Which suggested somebody powerful was protecting him. The question was who? A minute later the answer arrived. Conversations shifted subtly throughout the ballroom. Not dramatically. Just enough. Heads turned. Voices lowered. Attention moved. Mzee Kilonzo had entered the room. The old man looked exactly as he always did. Perfectly dressed. Perfectly groomed. Perfectly harmless. The appearance was so convincing it bordered on artistic achievement. Kamau watched him carefully. That's him. Yes. He looks like somebody who donates libraries. He does donate libraries. The billionaire frowned. That's confusing. Welcome to corruption. Kilonzo moved through the crowd effortlessly. Greeting guests. Shaking hands. Accepting praise. A beloved elder statesman enjoying another successful evening. Then he stopped. His eyes settled directly on Zawadi. Across the ballroom. For a moment neither moved. Then the old man smiled. Not surprised. Not alarmed. Amused. As though he had expected her. Which immediately made Zawadi uncomfortable. Because she disliked being predictable. Kilonzo began walking toward them. Guests instinctively moved aside. Nobody interrupted. Nobody interfered. The room understood something important was happening. Even if they didn't know exactly what. Miss Juma. His voice carried warmth and authority in equal measure. You look well. So do you. Thank you. His eyes shifted briefly to Kamau. Just briefly. But long enough. Recognition. Confirmation. No surprise whatsoever. Interesting. Very interesting. Because officially, Kamau Njoroge was missing. Yet Kilonzo appeared entirely unsurprised to find him standing in a ballroom. That told Zawadi more than any confession. The old man folded his hands. I must congratulate you. For what? The disappearing act. Kamau felt his stomach tighten. Kilonzo chuckled softly. Please don't look shocked. Half the city suspected it. Only half. Amina's voice whispered through the earpiece. Optimistic, Zawadi murmured. The old man's smile widened. Then slowly faded. The temperature of the conversation changed instantly. No raised voices. No threats. Just certainty. You are intelligent people. Nobody responded. You have discovered enough to become inconvenient. Kamau finally spoke. That's one way to describe it. Kilonzo looked at him. You should have stayed in technology. And you should have stayed away from my company. For the first time, something flickered in the old man's eyes. Not anger. Respect. A dangerous kind of respect. The kind granted to people who had become legitimate obstacles. You think this is about money? Again, nobody answered. Money is the least interesting part. The words landed carefully. Deliberately. Zawadi felt her attention sharpen. Because this felt genuine. Not performance. Not manipulation. Something else. Kilonzo glanced around the ballroom. At the politicians. The executives. The investors. The decision makers. Then he returned his gaze to Kamau. What is influence worth? The billionaire frowned. What? If you could decide who receives funding. Silence. Which companies survive? More silence. Which projects succeed? The room suddenly felt smaller. The old man smiled faintly. What is that worth? Nobody spoke. Because they already knew the answer. Everything. It would be worth everything. Kilonzo nodded. As I thought. Then he stepped closer. Close enough that only they could hear. His voice became quiet. Almost conversational. The money isn't disappearing. Kamau froze. You know that. The billionaire said nothing. Kilonzo continued. The money isn't being spent. Silence. The money is being collected. A chill passed through Zawadi. The exact conclusion they had begun approaching. The old man looked directly at Kamau. And then he asked the question that changed everything. Have you figured out what it's for yet? For the first time that evening, uncertainty appeared on Kamau's face. A genuine crack. A genuine doubt. Because the answer was no. He hadn't. Kilonzo saw it immediately. And smiled. Not triumphantly. Almost sadly. Then you are farther behind than I feared. Before anyone could respond, he stepped away. Conversation over. The old man melted back into the crowd. Leaving silence behind. For several moments nobody moved. Then Amina spoke into the earpiece. What just happened? Kamau continued staring after Kilonzo. I think. He stopped. The realization was arriving slowly. Like thunder approaching from a distance. Then he looked at Zawadi. And she saw something she had never seen before. Fear. Real fear. Not fear of death. Fear of understanding. What? She asked. The billionaire swallowed. Then quietly replied. I think we've been asking the wrong question. The music continued. The guests laughed. Champagne flowed. Yet suddenly none of it mattered. Because somewhere beneath the surface of Kenya's financial system, somebody had been collecting billions. Not spending. Not stealing. Collecting. For years. And nobody in that ballroom seemed surprised. Which meant the conspiracy was bigger than a handful of corrupt men. Much bigger. And for the first time since the investigation began, Zawadi suspected they weren't looking at a crime. They were looking at a plan. The drive back from the Windsor estate was unusually quiet. Not because nobody had anything to say. The opposite. There was too much to say. Too many possibilities. Too many questions. Too many answers that nobody wanted. Nairobi rolled past outside the windows. Neon signs. Nightclubs. Apartment towers. Street vendors packing up for the evening. The city looked ordinary. That was the unsettling part. Entirely ordinary. Meanwhile, somewhere beneath its skin, billions of shillings had been quietly moving for years. Collected. Protected. Hidden. For a purpose nobody yet understood. Kamau finally broke the silence. I need access to my systems. Amina looked over. You say that the way addicts talk about cigarettes. I built those systems. You also attracted assassins. Separate issue. No. Zawadi interrupted before the argument could mature into something annoying. We use the warehouse. Kamau frowned. The logistics warehouse? Yes. The facility belonged to one of her holding companies. Officially it stored telecommunications equipment. Unofficially it contained secure servers, investigation teams, and enough surveillance technology to make several intelligence agencies uncomfortable. Kamau nodded. Good. He sounded relieved. That worried Zawadi. People sounded relieved when they believed answers were near. Experience suggested answers were usually accompanied by fresh disasters. The warehouse sat in Nairobi's industrial district. A large grey structure hidden among freight depots and distribution centers. Nothing about it attracted attention. Which was precisely why it worked. Inside, the atmosphere was very different. Screens covered entire walls. Live camera feeds. Traffic monitoring. Communication intercepts. Data analysis. The room hummed with activity. Amina led Kamau toward a secure workstation. Try not to break anything. I own a technology company. That doesn't answer the concern. Within minutes he was working. Lines of data appeared. Networks expanded. Transaction streams unfolded across massive displays. Zawadi watched from behind. Not because she understood every technical detail. Because she understood people. And Kamau looked like a man following a scent. A dangerous scent. Hours passed. Coffee appeared. Then more coffee. At some point somebody ordered food. Nobody remembered eating it. The deeper Kamau dug, the stranger the picture became. Every hidden pathway. Every shell company. Every intermediary structure. All converged toward the same destination. One enormous financial reserve. Not spending. Not investing. Not laundering. Accumulating. Growing. Waiting. Finally Kamau sat back. His face had gone pale. Amina noticed fast. What? The billionaire looked at the screen. Then at them. Then back at the screen. What? Amina repeated. His voice emerged quietly. It's not a corruption fund. The room stilled. Zawadi moved closer. What do you mean? Kamau enlarged several transaction clusters. Then connected them. Patterns appeared. Timelines. Growth curves. Funding channels. The structure became visible. Not clearly. But enough. This isn't designed to enrich people. Amina frowned. People seem very enriched. That's a side effect. The answer made everybody uncomfortable. Because if billions were merely a side effect, then the actual objective must be enormous. Kamau continued. The money is being concentrated. Why? I don't know. That answer irritated him. Zawadi could see it. The uncertainty was eating him alive. Then suddenly he stopped speaking. His eyes narrowed. Something had caught his attention. A tiny anomaly buried inside the larger system. A reference code. Repeated. Hidden. Nearly invisible. Kamau zoomed in. Then froze. The room became silent. What? Zawadi asked. The billionaire swallowed. Then whispered. Oh. Amina sat forward. What oh? Kamau pointed at the screen. Several transaction pathways contained the same authorization sequence. The same signature. The same originating identity. One name. One person. The source of the entire structure. The architect. The founder. The ghost behind 15 years of hidden accumulation. Zawadi looked closer. Then felt a chill run through her. Because she recognized the name immediately. Everyone in Kenya would. The individual had supposedly died 12 years ago. Officially. Publicly. Completely. Amina stared at the screen. Then at Kamau. Then back at the screen. No. Kamau nodded slowly. Yes. No. Apparently. The room felt smaller. The implications spread outward instantly. If the name was genuine. If the records were real. Then an entire chapter of Kenyan history might have been rewritten. Zawadi's phone rang. One of her field operatives. She answered immediately. Talk. The man's voice sounded urgent. That got her attention. What happened? We found the board chairman. Everyone looked up. Kamau stood. Where? The operative inhaled. Then answered. Dead. Silence. Heavy silence. The board chairman. The man who betrayed Kamau. The man connected to David Mwangi. The man linked to Kilonzo. Dead. How? Zawadi asked. Officially. Heart attack. Nobody in the room believed that. Not for a second. The operative continued. There was something else. What? A message. The room went still. Of course there was a message. There was always a message. The operative spoke carefully. It was left on his desk. Zawadi felt her stomach tighten. What did it say? The answer arrived. Simple. Brutal. And impossible to ignore. The founders are returning. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Because suddenly the hidden fund. The dead architect. The collected billions. The old conspiracy. Everything felt connected. Yet somehow less understandable than before. Across the room, Kamau stared at the screen. At the dead man's name. At the transaction pathways. At the ghost from 12 years ago. And for the first time since this nightmare began, he wished he had stopped digging. Because some discoveries answered questions. Others created entirely new worlds. This one felt like the second kind. Then every monitor in the warehouse flashed red. Alarms erupted. Sharp. Urgent. Violent. The operations room exploded into motion. Analysts turned toward screens. Security personnel grabbed radios. Zawadi spun toward the nearest display. Multiple vehicles were approaching the warehouse. Fast. Very fast. Amina's face hardened. That's not good. The camera feeds confirmed it. Black SUVs. Trucks. Organized formations. Professional movement. Not police. Not random attackers. Something far worse. Someone had found them. And this time they weren't coming to send a warning. They were coming to finish the job. The first explosion hit the eastern wall at 11:17 p.m. The warehouse shook. Monitors flickered. Dust rained from the ceiling. Several analysts shouted simultaneously. And then, strangely, everything became calm. Not outside. Outside was chaos. Inside, Zawadi became calm. That was one of the reasons people trusted her. When the world caught fire, her thoughts became sharper. Status. The room immediately responded. Multiple vehicles. Thermal signatures on the perimeter. Signal jamming attempts. Possible sniper position. South entrance compromised. Zawadi processed everything in seconds. The attackers had arrived too quickly. Too precisely. This wasn't a search. They knew exactly where to come. Which meant one thing. A leak. Again. Amina came to the same conclusion. I am developing trust issues. You already had trust issues. Now they're professionally justified. Another explosion rattled the building. Kamau looked at the tactical screens. For the first time since this began, he felt genuinely overwhelmed. Not because of the danger. Because of the scale. This wasn't a few criminals protecting stolen money. This was a network. An organization. A machine. And machines protected themselves. Zawadi turned toward him. Can you move the data? Some. How long? 10 minutes. You have 5. That wasn't the answer. It's the answer you got. He nodded. Then sprinted toward the servers. Outside, the assault force tightened its perimeter. The operation leader stood beside a black SUV studying drone feeds. Professional. Patient. Dangerous. The kind of man who viewed violence as logistics. His phone vibrated. Mzee Kilonzo. He answered immediately. Report. The warehouse is contained. And the data? We are moving. A pause. Then. No mistakes. The line disconnected. The assault leader looked back toward the building. No mistakes. That was amusing. Because mistakes had already happened. The biggest one being Zawadi Juma. Nobody had expected her involvement. And now she was becoming a problem. Inside, Kamau worked furiously. Transaction records. Routing maps. Internal authorizations. Hidden pathways. Everything was being copied. Everything was being encrypted. Everything was being duplicated. The information had become too dangerous to exist in one place. Behind him, Amina watched the transfer progress. How much longer? 3 minutes. That's suspiciously competent. Thank you. It wasn't a compliment. The transfer reached 60%. Then 70. Then 80. Outside, gunfire erupted. Loud. Close. Professional. The attack had begun. The warehouse security team fought hard. Harder than the attackers expected. These weren't rented guards. They were former military personnel. Former intelligence officers. People who understood how to survive bad nights. The first breach team entered through the loading bay. The first breach team immediately regretted it. Crossfire erupted. The attackers fell back. Regrouped. Adapted. The warehouse defenders did the same. Zawadi watched the tactical map. The attack wasn't random. Every movement targeted communications, servers, and exits. Whoever planned this operation understood exactly what mattered. Which meant whoever planned it understood the investigation. A leak. Definitely a leak. Then a thought struck her. A dangerous thought. She turned toward Kamau. The board chairman. What about him? The message. The founders are returning. Zawadi nodded. Something finally clicked. Not perfectly. But enough. She grabbed a marker and moved to a whiteboard. Dates appeared. Names appeared. Companies. Deaths. Transaction patterns. Everything. Amina watched. Then slowly smiled. The smile worried Kamau. Because it meant she understood. What? Amina pointed. The dead people. Silence. The compliance director. Another point. The lawyer. Another. The board chairman. She looked at him. They weren't cleanup. The room froze. Kamau stared. No. Yes. Zawadi nodded. The realization was spreading. The deaths didn't fit. Not really. People hiding a conspiracy usually killed witnesses. These people were killing insiders. Founders. Participants. Architects. The pattern was completely different. The operation wasn't protecting the machine. It was restructuring it. And suddenly the message made sense. The founders are returning. Not metaphorically. Literally. Someone was removing the old guard. Preparing for a transition. A succession. A takeover. The collection fund wasn't merely wealth. It was a war chest. 15 years of preparation. For what? Nobody knew. Yet. The transfer hit 100%. Kamau exhaled. We have it. Zawadi turned. Good. What now? Her answer arrived instantly. Now we stop running. The billionaire blinked. I beg your pardon. Amina smiled. The smile returned. The dangerous one. We are going hunting. 3 hours later, just before dawn, they sat inside a secure operations room beneath a disused telecommunications facility. The warehouse was gone. Burned. Abandoned. Lost. Yet somehow the attackers had failed. The data survived. The evidence survived. Most importantly, the pattern survived. Kamau projected the financial network across an entire wall. Thousands of connections glowed in the darkness. For a moment nobody spoke. Then he pointed. There. A tiny cluster. Almost invisible. Hidden beneath the larger structure. A back door. A control mechanism. The original authorization system. The first system ever created. A system still active. Amina frowned. What does it do? Kamau zoomed in. Then smiled. For the first time in days. Not a nervous smile. Not a tired smile. A victorious one. Oh. Zawadi looked at him. What? The billionaire pointed again. This. He tapped the screen. This leads directly to the reserve account. Silence. Then understanding. The reserve. The collected billions. The thing everyone was killing for. The heart of the machine. Amina sat forward. You can access it? No. The excitement vanished. Then returned. But I can see where it goes. The room became still. Very still. Kamau followed the pathway. Company. Trust. Holding structure. Foundation. Another trust. Another foundation. Another shell. Then finally. The destination appeared. One name. One account holder. One owner. The person controlling everything. Nobody spoke. Because they all recognized the name. Even Zawadi. Even Amina. Even after everything. The answer still shocked them. Kamau stared at the screen. Then slowly whispered. No wonder Kilonzo is terrified. The room remained silent. Outside, dawn was beginning to creep across Nairobi. Inside, the final piece of the puzzle had finally appeared. And for the first time since the investigation began, they knew exactly who they needed to find. The hunt was over. The lioness had found her prey. The name on the screen belonged to a dead man. At least, that was what Kenya believed. For 12 years, the country had accepted the story. State funeral. Television tributes. Newspaper memorials. Public mourning. History closed. Case finished. Except history had apparently developed other plans. The account controlling the reserve fund belonged to a former political kingmaker who had officially died more than a decade earlier. A man who had spent years building influence across government, banking, telecommunications, and infrastructure before vanishing into national mythology. The reserve account was active. Not historically active. Currently active. Which meant one of two things. Either a dead man was managing billions of shillings. Or somebody had inherited his machine. Neither possibility was comforting. Amina stared at the screen. I would like one normal week. Nobody responded. Because they all wanted the same thing. The breakthrough came 2 hours later. Kamau traced a series of authentication requests buried within the original control structure. Tiny signals. Invisible to almost everyone. But not invisible to him. They pointed toward a private estate outside Nairobi. An estate owned by a charitable foundation. The kind of foundation that planted trees, sponsored scholarships, and smiled for photographs. The kind of foundation nobody investigated. The kind of foundation people trusted. Which immediately made Zawadi suspicious. By sunrise, they were moving. Not because they had enough evidence. Because they finally had a destination. And destinations were rare gifts. The estate sat on a ridge overlooking the city. Beautiful. Quiet. Expensive. The sort of place built by people who wanted privacy and admiration simultaneously. As their vehicle approached, Kamau studied the grounds through binoculars. Security guards. Vehicles. Generators. Communication equipment. Far too much infrastructure for a charitable foundation. That isn't a foundation. No, Zawadi agreed. It isn't. Amina lowered her binoculars. It looks like somebody built a government and forgot to tell the public. Nobody laughed. Because it wasn't entirely a joke. The deeper they dug, the more obvious the truth became. The reserve fund had never been about personal wealth. The billions were not collected for luxury. They were collected for leverage. To finance allies. influence institutions, shape contracts, reward loyalty, punish resistance. A private system of power operating beneath the official one. The machine wasn't replacing government. It was steering it. Quietly. Patiently. For years. And now somebody was preparing to take control of it. The final confirmation arrived unexpectedly. At 9:13 a.m., Amina intercepted an internal communication. A meeting. Scheduled for noon. Attendees included senior business figures, political operators, financial intermediaries, and Mzee Kilonzo. Zawadi looked at the list. Then smiled. Not because she was happy. Because she finally understood. Kilonzo wasn't the architect. He never had been. He was the caretaker. The steward. The man protecting the machine until the transition was complete. Which explains something important. His fear. His urgency. His mistakes. For weeks he had been trying to stop them. Not because they threatened him. Because they threatened whoever came next. He's protecting a successor, Kamau said. Yes. And the transition is happening today. Looks that way. Amina closed her laptop. Then we should probably ruin it. At 11:47 a.m., everything began to collapse. Not because of bullets. Not because of explosions. Because of information. Kamau released the evidence. All of it. The transaction pathways. The shell companies. The reserve structure. The hidden routing systems. The dead directors. The financial manipulation. The entire machine. Simultaneously. Media houses. Regulators. International partners. Auditors. Investigators. Everyone. Years of secrecy shattered in minutes. The reaction was immediate. Phones exploded. Servers overloaded. Newsrooms descended into chaos. Questions arrived faster than answers. Exactly as intended. Inside the estate, panic followed. Meetings stopped. People began leaving. Others began denying involvement. Several attempted to destroy records. Too late. The machine had been exposed. And once sunlight entered, secrecy became impossible. Mzee Kilonzo stood alone in a private office overlooking the grounds. For the first time in decades, he looked tired. Not frightened. Just tired. The door opened. Zawadi entered. Neither reached for a weapon. Neither needed to. The fight was already over. The old man studied her. Then laughed softly. I always suspected it would be someone like you. What does that mean? Someone stubborn. His smile faded. Most people see walls. He gestured toward the estate. You see cracks. Zawadi remained silent. Kilonzo walked toward the window. Below them, vehicles were leaving. People were running. The machine was coming apart. Slowly. But inevitably. We told ourselves we were protecting stability. His voice sounded distant. Almost reflective. Then one day we realized we were protecting ourselves. Zawadi watched him. No excuses. No denial. No dramatic confession. Just truth. Perhaps the closest thing to honesty he had offered in years. What happens now? She asked. The old man smiled sadly. The same thing that always happens. He looked toward the city. The next people arrive. For a moment neither spoke. Then security teams entered the office. The conversation ended. The era ended with it. 3 weeks later, Nairobi looked exactly the same. Traffic remained terrible. Politicians remained optimistic. Journalists remained loud. The city continued being itself. Yet beneath the surface, investigations were spreading. Boards were collapsing. Executives were resigning. Audits were multiplying. The machine had not vanished overnight. But it was wounded. And wounded machines leak secrets. Kamau stood on a rooftop terrace overlooking the city. The evening sun painted the skyline gold. Footsteps approached behind him. He smiled before turning. "You're late." Zawadi stopped beside him. "You should enjoy this." "What?" "The opportunity to complain." He laughed. "Fair point." For a while they stood quietly, watching Nairobi. Watching the city that had nearly killed them both. Eventually Kamau spoke. "You know, when we first met, I thought you disliked me." "I did." "That's harsh." It was accurate. He smiled. Then glanced sideways. "And now?" Zawadi considered the question. Longer than necessary. Just enough to make him nervous. Then she answered. "Now I think you're slightly less annoying." Kamau laughed. A real laugh. The kind that came easily. The kind that hadn't existed a few weeks earlier. "I'll take that." "Good." The city lights began appearing one by one below them. Tiny stars rising from the streets. For a moment, neither spoke. Neither needed to. Some stories ended with declarations. Some ended with kisses. This one ended with something quieter. Trust. The rarest thing either of them had found during the entire investigation. Kamau looked out across Nairobi. "Do you think it's over?" Zawadi followed his gaze. The city stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Beautiful. Complicated. Restless. "No. That's not very encouraging." "It wasn't supposed to be." He smiled. She smiled back. And together they watched the night arrive over Nairobi. The machine had fallen. The city remained. And somewhere beyond the lights, new secrets were already beginning to grow.
Thank you for listening. Tell me, which African country would you like the next Mafia story to be based in, and why? Drop your answers in the comments and I will take it from there. If you enjoyed the story, like, share, subscribe. Because somewhere in Africa, another story is already unfolding.